Welcome back to Fandom Sage Powers. This is a place where we discuss comics and, little this, little that. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I have discussed before with people online, friends, and that is Beast's villainous turn. People complain, and I've heard some people say that Hank's descent into villainy is out of character and it just doesn't feel right, or, they want the old Hank back and this isn't the real Hank. And I have to disagree with that sentiment. I think that where Beast has been written to go and his character's journey makes all the sense in the world, because it's something that seeds of this have been planted for 25, 30 years now. Beast has always had a disposition that would, lead to him going down the dark path, the villainous role. We've seen him so many times in alternate timelines, future timelines, different versions of Beast, and he always turns evil. So I want to know, what do you think about this? Is there a predisposition for Hank McCoy to abandon his moral center? I think so. And I'm going to explain why I think so. The version of Beast we're used to seeing is the iconic hairy blue, oh my stars and garters, monstrosity that we've, come to know and love. But it's hard to remember that originally Hank McCoy was just a really strong kid with extra big hands and feet with prehensile toes. He was a genius. He actually triggered his own mutation, his own secondary mutation, in fact, due to him being afraid of losing his intelligence by his mutation, ultimately going further. Hank became obsessed with the X gene itself, unraveling whatever mysteries it held and possibly reverse whatever the X gene does to a mutant. Very quickly, you see and we learn that he is willing to slide by certain rules and ethical guidelines in order to get a desired result, which is when he uses his own experimental solution on himself instead of, what a regular scientist should do, which is do trial and error and more research. And he's so eager and curious and desperate to get results and answers that he pretty much almost killed himself, because that's what could have happened. But instead he turned a gray, scary, furry creature. Then later, that blue color, which was meant to be drawn as black, but they couldn't really portray black fur and give you a lot of the definition back then. So they ended up saying he was dark blue. That continued to, be a hallmark of Beast throughout his publication history. Hank would go on to leave the X-Men team during a really interesting time. He joined the Avengers. Now, this is another big clue as to Hank McCoy's mental state. Why would he leave the team of mutants to join a team of non-mutants? And he wanted to either stand out or be, special, or he was ashamed of what had happened, what he had done. Because when he joined the Avengers, his personality was totally different. It was more exaggerated and almost goofy. I couldn't really take a person like that seriously if I was a superhero. So where did this affected personality come from? I believe that it was all a front in him trying to either reinvent himself or hide the pain and the shame of what had happened to him and what he had done to himself, which was have a self-fulfilling prophecy of making himself into a monster. Now, Hank would eventually come back to the X-Men, but it is because of a selfish reason. He does find out that the secondary mutation is a progressive kind of ongoing evolving mutation. This ongoing type of mutation is actually a specific thing in the real world called genetic atavism. Atavism refers to a regression to a state of something that is long forgotten or outgrown, or is like a de-evolution of sorts, something feral. Some people also refer to it as genetic memory. And scientifically speaking, we have all the genetic information coded in our DNA to produce and recreate, if our bodies needed it, whatever attribute from our ancestors had. For instance, we could grow functioning appendixes if we really needed to eat and digest wood again, because even though it's shriveled up and we don't use it and it's kind of obsolete, it's still mapped in our genome. So a mutant that is experiencing genetic atavism would have their appearance change quite a bit over short periods of time. And we see that a lot with Beast. He would look like an ape sometimes. He would go on to look almost like a feline. You see him looking big and Hulk-like, and he looked almost reptilian at one point. I remember I was like, wow. There is actually several mutants we know of that display the traits of genetic atavism. Wolverine is one. His bone claws are an example of that something that is coming from an animal place has presented itself in the now. And this is a trait from some feral past. Toad is another one. Toad is the perfect other example of this, because Toad's appearance constantly is changing and in flux. You'll notice, he would be more bumpy or green, or all kinds of things happen to Toad. His tongue got longer progressively throughout his publication history. It even started producing chemicals that can catch on fire. And he is also a genius too, which is an interesting thing to correlate between Beast and Toad having genetic atavism based mutations. This instability of the mutant gene for these mutants that have an atavism trait, specifically with Beast, this one is killing him apparently, because it might have been artificially induced, but maybe it would have always happened, but he pushed himself and inadvertently did this. So they end up being able to stabilize him. This has been a topic a couple of times. Sage helped him stabilize his genes, and as well as when he had brought the original 5 X-Men from the past into the present, his younger self worked with him to kind of get him settled into one form that wouldn't change so rapidly or shift at all. I don't know if this is still much of a problem now in the Krakoan era. Something tells me that he might have found some other workaround. But the fact that he hasn't resurrected himself or made a body of himself pre-furry Beast is very telling. It tells me that this is all by design. When Cassandra Nova sent him into a feral berserker rage and his greatest fear was losing his intelligence, that speaks to the core of Hank McCoy's psychosis and why he is the way he is. It's always been about how he is superior, which is his intelligence, which is this is his golden ticket. Without that, he feels he doesn't have anything else to provide. Of course, he'll be big and strong, but his mutation is in flux. It's always destroying him. It's always against him. I believe that he has chosen which parts of his mental capacity will be cannibalized by this atavism versus the parts of his brain that govern his intelligence. He has chosen to isolate those parts of his brain that deal with emotion, empathy, those human qualities. And it's always a progressive thing that happens in a lot of timelines, that he becomes progressively amoral. And a lot of time it's not so much that he is evil, but just indifferent. He doesn't care. And again, thinking back to the evidence of what he's done, he created one of the most destructively addictive mutant-based drugs, which is MGH, or mutant growth hormone, which was based on the original serum that he tried to use to cure himself of his X gene. And that just kind of went out there, and it's come back a couple of times. It's caused a lot of problems. He also was highly criticized for bringing the past X-Men, the original 5 X-Men, into our present from the past to help solve whatever issue they were dealing with at the time. And he kind of did this unilaterally with no one else's input on that, and then wasn't able to get them back to where they needed to be. So that was very, very questionable. During the time of the legacy virus, when he was almost at his breaking point, he thought that he was not going to be able to fix it. He was not going to be able to make a cure. And it's around this time that the X-Men, specifically Beast and Rogue and Iceman, they try to save a young girl named Threnody. Now, if you don't remember Threnody, she was a mutant that could sense death, people close to death, dying, just died, and kind of used that energy to her benefit in many ways, including finding out later she could resurrect people from the dead to a degree. Anywho, so they were going to save this girl, but Sinister got to her first, and Beast pretty much let Sinister take this girl instead of trying to help her, and in the hopes that Sinister would come up with a cure for the legacy virus using this girl, not knowing what would become of her. Now, it would come to find out later they would encounter Threnody again when Sinister did actually help the girl, but was also using her to do other nefarious things. But she was also trying to fight from the inside of his stronghold, which was found by these set of X-Men, Beast, Psylocke, I want to say Gambit. And it was underneath the orphanage where Cyclops grew up. And there was a secret lab where Sinister was researching all kinds of stuff. And the way Beast reacted when he found he could get in there and get to this information, I can almost see him salivating in a way. And I remember this section of panels in this comic, and I was like, wow, he's really tempted to dive in there and secretly always wanted to go there. You know, he wanted to push those boundaries and be like, oh, well, because he has some similar traits to Sinister. And that's just the real Dark Beast from that dark timeline. Age of Apocalypse is one example of where Beast can go. You know, it's an eventuality. Is it an inevitability? I don't know. Who can say? But he always ends up leaning that way, as we see in the Age of Krakoa. He was giving a leadership role, which is something that we hadn't seen as leader of X-Force. He had pure, unmitigated authority from Xavier to do whatever needed to be done. No questions asked, any methods necessary to ensure mutantkind safety. And that's a big blank check to write somebody that is already on their last moral fiber, because he was finding new ways to impose this lane that he was given to compartmentalize Nick Fury who, okay? Maria Hill who. To lie, to manipulate, he really pushed it to some levels that are unprecedented. I don't think enough people talk about it. What he did to Wolverine, especially. And that is a very personal thing, especially knowing Wolverine's history and what he went through. For Beast to do what he did, which was to clone him and make all these clones of him, to use him as basically his own personal hit squad, his Wetworks team, and pretty much this fodder. When one would die, he would just probably recycle it and break it down for materials. And this is the way he started to sound like and act like. And it happened right in front of everybody's faces, and nobody could really look at it. It was like you were too close to see it. And then they know him. Really sad. But I believe that the seeds were planted a long time ago. This has been a natural character arc. And as sad as it is, sometimes people that we care about are pushed to the dark side, either by coercion or by design. And it's my belief that Dr. McCoy knows exactly what he is and what he wants and what he doesn't want. What he wants is to remain one of the smartest people in the world. And what he wants is to have power. And what he wants is for some people to mind their own damn business, because he's going to keep doing what he wants to do. And that's ultimately what we see in every evil variation that we met. When it was Sublime Beast, when he was possessed by Sublime, he loved it. He didn't want to give up that power. And he was going against the Phoenix and was going to take everything out. When it was Nimrod Beast, when it was the God mutant that we saw glimpses of in these fractured, broken timelines, when he pretty much was an anamorphous creature, and freaking the Last of Us clicker cordyceps beast. Like, he has no scruples. He has no limit to which he will go. And they have a real problem that they have come up with a pseudo solution, which is to resurrect an older version of Hank when he was still optimistic and hadn't been completely broken and resigned to the fact that he was the way he was, and it was nature. And fixing his physical form would do nothing to help his mental or his soul, because that ultimately is what drives him to choose being in control of his intelligence and his authority and power versus letting whatever nature had intended. And he did it time and time again. So if you don't address that with this version of Hank, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again, because that fear is too great. His fear is too great to be just a regular brained person. He will do everything in his power to let that not happen. Trust. I always thought that his condition and his mutation was a very fascinating mutation, because it is a unique one in itself, and a lot of people don't talk about it enough. And again, like Toad and a few other ones in DC Comics, Killer Croc is another one that displays genetic atavism by showing these animalistic traits. So a lot of time it is with a were beast type person that is half creature, half human looking, or a humanoid. And Wolfsbane specifically, I guess, would be a lycanthrope, but I mean, she's still technically showing atavism as well. So Sabretooth, Wolverine, any of those types of people. I would even argue Angel as well, especially knowing that his specific race of the Nephilim, they're ancient. So that as well, him just expressing those genetic traits of something old is as well. well. So think about that when you're looking at these movies. They're also alpha, beta, gamma, and omega level mutants, but they also have even subcategories in those categories like genetic atavism. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I always thought that was pretty fascinating. I had a really great conversation a couple years ago about it, and I thought about it again, and I wanted to share with you. So thank you for coming back to my page and my channel and, listen to me ramble on like I know some stuff. If you do like my videos, please like and subscribe and share with your friends if you want to have some really cool discussions. I'll be kind of falling into this lane. I think I figured out that talking about what I think about certain aspects of the comic versus trying to do what other people are already doing. So I do hope that I carve out a little place for myself within the community. And thank you again. I'll see you on the next video.